So you and I, we're about to go on a little adventure together. That adventure is going to span 118 years of Tudors, and it's going to be one generation at a time. How does that sound to you? I'll be your host this evening. My name is Christina. Thank you for joining us here at my Tudor era Tapestry. Jane Parker danced around the room holding a letter from her father. The messenger had arrived early this morning. Jane's father had acquired a tentative position for her to attend Queen Catherine next year when she was 12. Things could change, of course. A more noble girl could inquire about the position. Jane's father was a mere baron, but he had a lot of connections at court, and with any luck, Janie could rise to be a countess or maybe even a duchess. She would need new clothes, nice clothes fit for a lady of the court. She couldn't wait for her first opportunity to read to the queen or attend a ball. She would have opportunities to travel with the queen and attend her at royal ceremonies and dinners. Janie's life at court would be different from her life at her family manor. She knew all of the dances she would need and hoped they were impressive enough to catch someone's attention. She had a grand collection of ribbons, and she planned to use those to make friends at court. Janie had never been much of a leader, but she had always been a very good friend. She was kind, thoughtful, giving, and caring, and she knew all of the latest braids. Along with her vast ribbon collection, she was sure she would make friends fast. In the frost-covered days of February 1517, Princess Mary Tudor was warm and safe in the arms of her nurse. She spent her days being cared for by the best nurses the king was able to find. She never wanted for anything. When Princess Mary was hungry, she was fed. When she was tired, her cradle was rocked. She had grown from a small newborn into a small infant. She did not walk yet, but her nurses thought that she would as soon as she tried to stand on her wobbly baby legs. She was strong, not quite so much physically, but strong-willed. It was like this 1-year-old already knew she was a queen in training. She was in charge, and few people would choose not to acquiesce to her every need. Mary was the long-awaited only child of King Henry and Queen Catherine. Her father seemed distant. He was a busy king, but he was also a disappointed father, because Mary was not a prince. Conversely, her mother was very pleased. Catherine had waited 7 years to have a surviving child. Now Princess Mary was her mother's whole world. Queen Catherine was already making plans for Mary's education. She would be trained in dancing, languages, music, and of course piety. Catherine would make sure she was a well-rounded princess, a princess that could handle any situation, with or without the help of a man. She would be a powerful woman, from a long line of powerful women, a queen. Catherine was enjoying her role as a mother in the spring of 1517. Her darling daughter had just celebrated her first birthday. Catherine felt very blessed to be the mother of such a beautiful, intelligent little girl. Of course, it was too early to see all of her talents. But as her mother, Catherine saw every little hint of her daughter's talents and personality. The princess had deep, thoughtful eyes. Queen Catherine could clearly see that. Henry had been disappointed that she had been a girl. Catherine thought he would surely change his mind once he saw all of her potential. But he had not. He had seen none of the charms his young daughter possessed. He occasionally visited Catherine's bed and made an attempt for a male heir. But Catherine could tell his heart wasn't in it. She had disappointed him too many times, and he would just rather spend his time with Bessie Blount, Catherine's lady-in-waiting. Elizabeth Blount was 19 years old, and she seemed to be the favorite playmate of Catherine's husband, Henry. When he wasn't with the Queen, which was often, or dealing with matters of state, he was most often enjoying his leisure time with Bessie. Catherine liked the girl enough, but she would like her better if she wasn't dallying with the king. Just after Princess Mary's first birthday, a milestone Catherine had prayed for, the Queen received some sad news from Portugal. Her sister Maria had died at the age of just 34. Maria had borne 10 children in 14 years, and her body had been under severe strain. Her last baby had caused her to be so exhausted that she was temporarily mentally confused before her eventual recovery. And her youngest baby had lived only 54 days, a feeling Catherine could relate to. Her heart had broken for Maria, but then Maria had passed also. She was survived by her husband, King Manuel I, and 8 of her 10 children. Catherine expected Manuel to marry again, although he was in no need of heirs. His son, Prince John, was nearly 15. He had been taught by some of the most notable scholars of the day, and Catherine had heard from Maria that he was a pious young man and had great hopes for his future reign as the King of Portugal. Princess Isabella was 13, a young age to lose her mother. She knew many languages and was diligent in her studies. Maria had praised her piety. Princess Beatrice was 12. She was being educated by her governess. As the second daughter, it wasn't thought that she would reach the heights of her older brother and sister. Prince Louis had just turned 11, just 4 days before his mother's death. The letters had called him brave and stoic. Prince Ferdinand was nearly 10. Catherine didn't know much about him, but she had heard he had a passion for learning. Prince Alfonso was nearly 8. Despite his youth, Catherine had heard that they may make him a cardinal soon, possibly in just a few months, sometime after his 8th birthday. Prince Henry had just turned 5. He was destined for the church also, but he still had several years in the royal nursery left to go. Prince Duarte was 1. He wouldn't have memories of his mother, and for that Catherine was most sad. She knew Maria had loved all of her children, but had so little time with them. Queen Catherine knelt at her private altar and prayed for Maria's soul and for the lives of the children she had left here. Now that Maria was gone, Catherine had only one sibling left, her sister Juana. Juana was in Castile, kept away from public events. She had gone quite mad, or so the tales went, after the death of her husband Philip. Her son Charles, now 17, had been ruling in Juana's stead for a year. Catherine worried about how little guidance the next generation of her family had, and made a vow to guide young King Charles as best she could from her kingdom across the Channel. Princess Margaret Tudor, Dowager Queen of Scots, was back home in England after many years away in Scotland. She had felt forced to flee her home after the death of her first husband, King James. Thinking she had no support, Meg had remarried Archibald Douglas, Earl of Angus. Her regency had subsequently been stripped from her, along with the custody of her children. She had fled, very pregnant, for the safety of England. Now she lived here with her 6-month-old daughter, also named Margaret. Her brother had welcomed a baby in February, named Princess Mary, and her sister Mary had welcomed a baby in March, little Lord Henry. Margaret felt sure that her English daughter could grow up quite happily in her homeland alongside her cousins. But Meg was lonely. Her husband, worried about his lands and holdings up in Scotland, had returned north just after baby Margaret's birth, but it helped that she had her family around her again. Her relationship with her husband, Earl Archibald Douglas, had grown distant in the nearly 1 year that she had been in England apart from him. At first his letters were loving, hopeful, and often, but as the months wore on, the separation seemed more distant, and the letters stopped arriving as often. Henry had been spending a lot of his time trying to make a peace arrangement for Meg to return to Scotland safely and reunite with her husband. Hopefully she would be granted an audience with her son, 5-year-old King James. Young King James had recently been moved because of a plague outbreak in the city, but she had received word that he was healthy and safe. In the time that her brother, King Henry, had been negotiating her return to Scotland, her husband had also been able to make tentative peace with the regent, John Stuart, Duke of Albany. If Margaret hoped to see her son at all, both her and her husband were going to have to be on very good terms with Albany. Her departure from England was now all planned and prepared. The last thing Margaret had left to do in England was attend a tournament in her honor. This tournament was King Henry's way of saying goodbye to his sister and his niece, 1-year-old Margaret. The tournament was a fun display of family unity before Margaret boarded her carriage days later to make the return trip north. It would take nearly a month to reach the border. She was not in a hurry to return. The peace still felt shaky under her feet, but the regent and her husband would meet her at the border, and she would start repairing her relationships from there. In the summer heat of 1517, Mary Tudor was now 21 years old. She was laboring for the second time. She felt older than her 21 years. She had spent months as the Queen of France, and then secured her own future by marrying for love. Charles was not a king or a prince, but he was a duke. Mary did not care that he was below her station. She did not care that he was 12 years her senior. She did not care that he had a roving eye. Usually, that was expected. He was a gentleman of the court. He always returned home to Mary and the children. Mary's stepdaughter Anne was, as people said, the spitting image of her mother and namesake. She was newly returned from Austria. She had been enjoying an education there since the death of her mother, but Mary had thought it best for her to return home and be with the family. The bonding had been harder with 10-year-old Anne than it had been with 7-year-old Mary. Mary had lost her mother before she had turned 1. This was her first opportunity to have a mother, and she was excited for that chance. The birth of little Henry had helped with that. Mary had been 6 when he was born, and she had sat quietly by the cradle watching him for hours. Henry was 1 now and growing like a weed. This country life agreed with him. It helped Mary to have him there with her, a little piece of Charles while he was away in London. Mary missed court, but she wanted to spend time here with the children, making a home. Now she was laboring with her second baby. Charles was not at home, but word would be sent after the baby's birth, and Mary was sure he would return to see her and meet their newest baby. The birth went as smoothly as it could, for the heat that came with July. And at the end of her pains came a beautiful, healthy baby girl. Charles did return home to meet his daughter, and together they named her Frances. It was not a common name for the time. Frances was primarily a boy's name. In polite company, they would claim she was named for St. Francis of Assisi, but deep down, only they knew that she was named for their dear friend, Francis I, King of France, the only powerful man to support their union without being forced to by circumstances. He had been in attendance at their secret wedding, cheered them on, and now they had sweet baby Frances, a little girl with an already strong spirit to remind them of his friendship. In 1517, Lady Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury, was in the middle of a huge project. She was building a manor house. The property had a manor house on it that was hundreds of years old. It had belonged to her grandfather, the Earl of Warwick. Her grandfather had slowly removed residents from the property until it became a private deer park. When her brother was executed, the property reverted back to the crown. Now, with Maggie restored to full honor, she was given this property back. The old manor house was in some disrepair, old and in need of much work. Maggie had decided to just build a new, modern manor house. It was actually going to be a castle, Warblington Castle. Maggie had the funds, and she wanted to build this property up to the grandeur of her station. Warblington Castle would be built out of brick and have a grand moat surrounding it. The deer park, of course, would stay. Maggie was going to lavishly furnish this, and it would be a grand hunting lodge. In the back of her mind, Maggie knew that one step out of line, and she would lose this grand castle that she was building. But she tried not to think about that too much, as her vision started to materialize. This would bring her family back up to the level that they had once been, and back to their rightful position as powerful peers of the kingdom. October of 1517 in Dusseldorf was cooler than past years, and 2-year-old Princess Anna had been kept indoors more often since the temperature had dropped. She had not minded the indoors, although she did miss the long walks with her nurse in the gardens. The servants kept the fires burning hot and the castle corridors warm. Her nurses would take her and her baby brother to her mother's quarters in the afternoons, except lately Anna had noticed they were not doing that as often. The more she thought about it, she had not seen her lady mother in a few weeks. She asked her nurse where her lady mother was, with her limited vocabulary, and she was reminded that her mother was with child and expecting the new baby any time now. Anna remembered now and pondered this for a moment. A new baby. She decided that the baby would be fun. Her little brother William was all chubby rolls and smiles. Her older sister Sibylla was almost 6 and always too busy with lessons. Anna decided that a new baby would be a good addition to the nursery. Lately, she had felt quite grown at 2. Her older sister was much more advanced than herself, but her baby brother made Anna feel like she was also an older sister who was quite advanced. William could do nothing for himself, and cried if his nurses got too far away. Anna would run in the garden until her nurses were almost out of sight, until they called for her to return. This new baby would surely cry if their nurse wandered too far. Anna thought it may be nice to have a younger sister this time. She had never had one of those before. As the cool of autumn settled over the French court, Anne Boleyn felt settled. She had been there a couple of years now, the longest she had really stayed anywhere since Hever. Things felt settled. She was still attending Queen Claude, who seemed to spend most of her time pregnant. Every year or so there would be another announcement. King Francis, 23, and Queen Claude, now 18, had 2 children, 2-year-old Princess Louise and 1-year-old Princess Charlotte, and one more on the way. Anne could almost feel the tension. The Queen had produced just 2 girls, just like her mother had, and that wasn't enough. This third baby had to be a boy. That was how it had happened in her family, too. First Mary, then Anne, and then finally George. Anne wondered what they would name him. Probably Francis, after the king, or maybe Charles, after the king's father. But this one had to be a boy. Mary was still popular at court. She seemed to have grown closer to everyone, even the king. There were rumors that she was too friendly to everyone, especially the king. Anne didn't listen to the rumors too much. She hadn't always been one for gossip, but she was one to notice how quickly rumors spread throughout a royal court, how quickly one touch or smile caused whispers to fly. Mary would probably do well to flirt less and read more, but that wasn't like Mary. Anne was starting to look at gossip as a form of currency. It seemed like there was power in knowledge, even if that knowledge was who was sleeping in the king's bed. Mary didn't understand Anne's books. She smiled and flirted and kept everyone's attention without books. Anne preferred wit to charm, and her books to late nights with the court. She noticed there was no rumors about her. She was barely noticed. Her mother and father weren't getting letters warning them about Anne's behavior, and though Anne could see how much fun Mary was having, she much preferred being a bookish wallflower who was reliable for a witty quip. In a couple of months, when Queen Claude went into confinement, Mary would have more time to flirt, and Anne would have more time to read. Marguerite's court was buzzing with new ideas. There was talk about humanism. This wasn't new, but it was in fashion. People were talking about education and taking the classics seriously. But Anne had heard, in other secret whispers, there was a growing movement to reform the Catholic Church. This wasn't a widely popular idea, and in a lot of places it was illegal to even talk about it. But here in France, people seemed much more open-minded that the Church could be flawed. Marguerite trusted Anne with these new ideas. Anne was 16 now. Marriage probably wasn't far away, but for now she wanted to learn as much as possible. And for what it was worth, Mary would probably be married first, and at 18, she didn't have any prospects that Anne could see. In November 1517, a kind of darkness settled over the Parr family home in London. 5-year-old Lady Catherine Parr's Lord Father had died. Cat had not been permitted to see him before he died. He had been at home, but he was ill, and her nurses and Lady Mother had decided the risk was too great for the children to visit with him. Cat was sad about this turn of events. Her Lady Mother was crying a lot. She had loved Cat's father. They both attended the king and queen at court. Catherine did not see either of them every day, but she was able to see them every week because the noble children were living nearby in London. However, now she would not receive any more visits from her Lord Father, and her mother would be returning to her duties at court. Cat would stay back at home with her nurses and servants. She had heard some of the servants talking about her father's will. They had said that most of his estate was going to her 4-year-old little brother William. Will was too little to run the estate, so for now, other men and her Lady Mother would do it for him. The servants had also said that he had left dowries for both Cat and her 2-year-old sister Anne. When they were married, proper dowries would be provided by their father's estate. Cat thought about how far off her wedding would be, and immediately put it out of her head. Cat's day-to-day life did not change after the death of her father, but when her mother would visit, on frequent trips from the court, Cat saw her sad eyes, and she missed his presence. Lady Jane Seymour was 9 years old and preparing for the Christmas holidays. In 1517, she had embroidered a handkerchief for her Lord Father and embroidered a cloth for her mother's table. She had helped her younger sisters prepare small gifts to present to their parents. Jane had become the leader of her 2 little sisters, something she was never able to do with girls her own age. She was pleasant enough, but she was shy, quiet, and unassuming. Lady Jane's mother was pregnant again. She had started this family by bearing several sons, followed by bearing several daughters. For this reason alone, Jane thought she was expecting another sister. Another sister would be just fine with her. Jane's elder brother Edward was 17 and making his rise under the Duke of Suffolk. When Princess Mary had married him while she was still in mourning for her husband, it was quite a scandal. The servants whispered had slowed a bit on that topic, but Jane was still worried for her brother's reputation, residing in a household like that. Henry, 14, Anthony, 12, and Thomas, 10, still resided at home, but they also had plans to attend court. When Jane thought of herself as a grown lady, she imagined herself much like her mother. She was a lady, married to a knight, raising children in the countryside. Jane imagined her sisters would have very similar futures. You can share your thoughts with me at longlivethequeenpodcast@gmail.com. Slide into my DMs on Facebook or Instagram at Long Live the Queen Podcast, or join the party on Patreon, where we have extended episodes and bonus content.